hour, I've done an hour and a half, I've done a half-day workshop, a full-day workshop. So I've never done it in 45 minutes, so we'll work with that. There is a website, apetrosky.wikispaces.com, that you can go out to for all of the resources that I'm going to reference today, including this presentation. And this is that website. And down here on the left-hand side is creating the multiplayer classroom. And there's a link out to my syllabus that I'll show you a little bit later, as well as a link out to a presentation that includes some of the screen captures from the course. And while we're doing that, open up and cue this up just so. Try to, just so it's up and running when we need it. So it's apetrosky.wikispaces.com. Okay, so let that log in. So yes.
So I think in the spirit of full disclosure, are you a gamer and which ones do you play?
I'm sorry?
Are you a gamer? Do you play games like in a video game?
I play games, but that's actually not what this section's about.
Oh, okay.
So we'll, and that's a great segue into a question that I have for all of you. Just a little bit about my role before I try to find out where you guys are coming from and what you're looking for from the session. I coordinate the Learning Technologies Master of Science program at Harrisburg University and teach in the program, and one of the courses that I've turned into a multiplayer classroom is in the program. I also work with our faculty at Harrisburg University to integrate technology into the classroom, and we have a few other professors who are doing this model in a variety of different implementations. So some of them are not going as full throttle with it as I have. And then we have a Center for Advanced Entertainment and Learning Technologies where we do look at playing games as learning solutions. And so this multiplayer classroom concept is a little different than that. So, yeah, this is one of the things that's not going to work. So let's skip through that. And let me ask a little bit about you guys, though, just kind of old school, raise of hand, even though I won't be able to show a nice little bar graph with that. How many of you are in the K through 12 space? Anyone? K through 12 teachers? Okay. Higher ed? Okay. Are you professors? Okay. Educational technologists? More of you? Okay. And how many of you are in corporate learning? Okay. So great. I know where I'm targeting then for my audience. So what I'll share with my course is probably, which will be good, is right in line with what the level of learning that you guys are looking at. Okay, so how many of you, to this gentleman's original question, came here today to learn about playing games in the classroom? That's okay. I want to know so I can clarify. Okay, 3. Okay. How many of you have read about or heard about the multiplayer classroom concept and came here to learn more about that from an implementation standpoint? Okay, more of you. Okay, how many of you have already done a multiplayer classroom? Okay, no one. All right. So what we're talking about today is not playing games in the classroom necessarily. That can be a part of the multiplayer classroom experience, but it's actually designing the course as a game. And part of that gameplay does not include games. It doesn't even necessarily have to include any digital elements to the classroom or the gameplay. Certainly there are reasons to incorporate those elements and there are benefits from doing so, but we're really talking about looking at the course design from a game designer's perspective and turning that into gameplay. So we'll take a look at what it is a little bit more, why do it. I'll share what it looks like, at least my version of the multiplayer classroom. What are the results? And we'll definitely give ourselves a round of applause if we get through all of that within 45 minutes, and if we don't all pass out from the heat. So let's all pull together and see if we can achieve both of those goals somehow. So what is the multiplayer classroom? So the concept is really based off of a book from Sheldon, who's a game designer or is a game designer by profession and was a professor at Indiana University when he first started looking at this concept of course design coupled with his work and background in game design. And he was teaching game design courses at the time at Indiana University. Now he's a professor at Rensselaer Polytechnic, and this is kind of the Bible of the multiplayer classroom concept, and where hundreds and hundreds of multiplayer classroom designs have originated from. So what I'm talking about today is really based on his work and the multiplayer classroom, designing coursework as a game. Would definitely recommend that as a resource. It's a great read, and I'll share some of the case studies from the book here today. So the multiplayer classroom takes into account all the things that are good about games, and including story, character, all the things that you see up here, a number of game mechanics as well, from the standpoint of things that work well in that live classroom environment. So not all mechanics transfer, but certainly designing a multiplayer classroom is just like designing any other game. It's just a different delivery format and mechanism. Anyone know what these terms, these acronyms stand for? Okay, what are they? Or one of them.
A massive multiplayer. I can't do it now.
Yeah, there you go. All right, it works. See, we're pulling together as a team to get through this. Awesome.
I play
Massive multiplayer online role-playing game and massive multiplayer online game. So the multiplayer classroom concept comes from these gaming environments and taking the elements from these environments that work well in an educational setting and incorporating them into a course design. Anyone ever heard of World of Warcraft? Okay, you folks. Anyone play World of Warcraft? All right, you guys have a lot more patience and investments in a gameplay than I do, but a lot of people do, and 7 to 10 million people playing or have World of Warcraft accounts. A large number of those are active users. And a few years ago, I don't see the articles quite as much anymore, but a few years ago there were articles about how the IBM, Microsoft, Cisco were actually going into World of Warcraft and targeting guild leaders in World of Warcraft for business executive, IT executive types of positions. And the reason why is because these guild leaders were managing thousands of players, tons of resources to achieve a goal in the game and succeeding in that, which essentially is the same thing that you do in business as a manager and executive. Yes?
One of my best friends did that, not with that company, but he now runs an IT company in Philadelphia, and they're gangbusters.
Awesome. And they found him on World of Warcraft, or
no,
he just happened to be a World of Warcraft?
He built his management skills doing that,
right.
And is now running a company.
Yep. Thank you for sharing that. That's excellent. People usually stare at me oddly when I say that, but we'll look at some of the things that are, and here they are, some of the things that are certainly educational or skill building in a game like World of Warcraft that can be applied to a business setting or a job. And these are, if you don't play MMORPGs or aren't familiar with them or haven't played World of Warcraft, and World of Warcraft is not the only MMORPG, there are a number of them out there, and there are a few popular ones, but World of Warcraft is like the big one. I mean, everyone, no other MMORPG has that many players in it as World of Warcraft does. So these are some of the elements that are taken from those types of environments that can be brought into the classroom in this game design format. So I'll show you some examples of what we're talking about here a little bit later. But XP is experience points, and essentially is akin to the grade, or takes the place of a grade. Now, in education and formal education, nothing takes the place of a grade ultimately. But from the standpoint of the students or the players' progress, XP now becomes something that is more coveted than an A, a B, or so on. There are levels in the game that initiate or indicate a player's level of skill or advancement in the game based off of things that they've done or things that they've collected or ways in which they've collaborated. Players usually play in the form of an avatar as part of incorporating that story into the gameplay. students work together as teams and guilds and actually compete against each other in guilds like they would in an MMORPG environment. I'll show an example of zones a little bit later, roles also. Quest, crafting, and raids are how people essentially complete assignments in a multiplayer classroom. So those things are very similar to assignments that might be given in a traditional classroom, only they're in the form of things that are related to this gaming environment, and as part of that, students are given a choice or more choice as to what they can craft quests or how they do raids with each other or with other guilds to gain points or to complete assignments. So one of the big elements of the multiplayer classroom is that additional element of some student choice, and we'll take a look at some other benefits or differences from a traditional classroom as well. And then I'll explain or show an example of lands a little bit earlier, or a little bit later. All of these can be kind of designed and created really to your specifications as you need or want to with your classroom and your multiplayer classroom formats. There's no one way of doing any of this, but these are some of the elements that go into the format. As I said, you can also choose to select one or two items versus all of these. And that's also a customization of the experience. And like I said, some colleagues are choosing to transition to this format by doing just that, by just choosing a few of the items and integrating them slowly. So one of the things that you'll notice about everything I've talked about so far is that it is a fantasy format. It's kind of Dungeons and Dragons, warriors and princesses, and your multiplayer classroom format has to be in that format. False. You can make it any type of theme that you would like. One of the exercises that I do in a course we teach related to designing classes in this format and also in the workshop is, let's retheme our multiplayer classroom format. Could be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, could be the legal system, could be university structure, could be law enforcement, could be basketball team, could be really anything that you want it to be, and you would kind of adjust the naming of your elements in the format or in the multiplayer classroom to match that theme. So yes, for a classroom full or a university full of nurses that are probably, and I could be wrong here, but probably 70% female. No, the Dungeons and Dragons probably isn't going to hit home. And for people maybe who aren't gamers by nature and don't play a lot of games necessarily and aren't into kind of a fantasy theme in general, again, you can retheme and look at this a little differently than the fantasy theme. So yes, go ahead.
Based on then your target audience, is the course designed, I guess then the course designed is course designed for the students coming, like how would you know what student might be interested, what topic or theme?
Yeah, no, you would definitely design that as part of just knowing your general audience. And then, part of the design, and I'll show the syllabus a little bit later, is some flexibility in that experience so that the student can kind of personalize it like they would be able to in a game. Yeah. So gamification is probably a term that you've heard of, and what we're talking about is very similar to that. Using game elements in what are traditionally non-game environments. So this is a form of gamification and gamifying the classroom. So why would we want to do this? And why did I want to do this? Well, one reason I wanted to do it is because it's the field I'm in, and it was an experiment and personal research. But some things to think about regarding a traditional classroom, which I'm generalizing here, and what a multiplayer classroom offers as well. So traditionally, the classroom is very teacher-centered and teacher-driven. It can be engaging, even if it's teacher-led, but often is engaging based off of the teacher kind of driving everything that's being done. versus being immersive. And then you can see some of the other differences that you know, from my perspective of this format compared to a traditional classroom format. One of the big elements, or two big elements at the bottom there, are the fact that in a traditional classroom there aren't a lot of opportunities for 4 points or for a grade, and when you do not achieve up to par or maybe achieve at the level you'd like to, that can often be damaging for the rest of the semester. So there are things in a traditional classroom that you can fail at and you may never recover from, regardless of your performance in other parts of the class. In the multiplayer classroom format, what we're looking at moving to is trying to present lots of opportunities for students to really fail. If you think about it, that's what games are. They're thousands of opportunities to fail and to learn from those failures, and to fail without extreme consequences. And as part of that, ongoing and regular feedback is definitely part of transitioning to the format, to the design, to take advantage of, again, the benefits of game environments in learning. And I certainly will take questions at the end, and I, again, am a little trying to stay on track with that 45-minute target. But if you have any questions while I'm, talking, certainly jump right in, offer some ideas, suggestions, comments. Would love to have it be a conversation as well. I want to make sure that I'm kind of sharing everything related to this potentially new concept to you. So in the book, there are some examples of doing this. I mentioned Sheldon is a game designer and a game design professor. So this format, most would say, obviously you can teach game design courses in this format, but can you teach anything else in this format? And the book includes case studies from a variety of levels, as well as a variety of subject matters. So these are some of the results from high school biology class. And I've just kind of taken pieces out of the case study for this slide. So, basically shows an improvement in grades here. And quite a bit of improvement in some cases. Let's give you a second to peruse that.
So a good question.
Yeah.
Do you find that it's helpful for the learner with different kind of learning when you're designing courses? Because you work with more visual, with more hands-on. Would that help those students retain their visual?
It could. Depends on how you design it. So the question was about different learning abilities or learning styles or preferences, really, of learners, and whether this type of format, helps address those different preferences. And it certainly could, if you were to design it that way. One of the things that you'll see in my course is that I, instead of assigning very specific readings to the students, I gave them a variety of resources to choose from, including videos, reports, textbook excerpts, as well as articles, PDFs, web, variety of different things, and they could really choose the article that they wanted to read, essentially, as part of moving to this format and allowing them to kind of pursue and design their own experience in the course. So that type of thing can happen. So yeah, definitely presenting the material in different formats as well. One of the things that I got feedback on, and especially for graduate students, although certainly would be the case, or could be the case for undergrads as well, was that a number of them really liked the pacing of the course from the standpoint that it was under their control. So some of them didn't do any of the assignments the first 4 or 5 weeks of the course, and backloaded their assignments, and they indicated that really helped them because of being able to manage their own schedule and their own time the way they needed to.
I might be jumping ahead, but is there any software that would help you implement these ideas?
There is, but you don't necessarily need software to do it.
But if you wanted to, there are.
There is one. There's actually 2 options out there. One is called Classcraft. I forget the other one, but I can get you that information. But there is another one. 3D Game Lab, I think, is what it's called. Yeah. And here's another just excerpt from a case study. So this one, additionally, or the first one was a focus on grade improvement, and this is a focus on the engagement and preparation for class. So one of the outcomes of the multiplayer classroom format in this instance was sorry, trying to balance the noise and the heat. So one of the impacts for this class was that students were better prepared when they came to class as a result of the format. And wouldn't we all love that? I mean, we probably all struggle with getting students to do the readings and come prepared to have discussion and to explore things a little bit more. So this was the emphasis here as far as the results. And students also were more well informed, or I can't imagine that students dropped a class before actually knowing what their grade was, but apparently that was happening. And in this case, students were much more aware of where they were and how they were performing in the class. So high school, college, and now middle school as well. And one of the things to pull out from this case study is less focus on the grade. And again, that's something I try to emphasize in all of my courses, and focus on the learning outcomes, the benefit of what you're learning, how you're going to use it, why you should be thinking about it critically. And even at the middle school level, they were able to achieve that with this format. So why was I specifically looking to change my course into this format? It was teacher-centered. There was a lot of discussion in the course, but it was really all driven by me and what I was deciding to do, and not a lot of student input into decisions on what they would create or what they would investigate, and so I wanted to move to more of that environment. The other part of this course, and maybe unique to this course, is that it's a survey course in learning technologies. So we investigate over 14 weeks. We investigate 12 to 15 or 16 learning technologies. And I would start at the beginning with course management systems, learning management systems, work my way all the way up, Web 2.0, virtual classrooms. And there are students who have experience in some of those tools already. So I was really limiting the students with more experience and not allowing them to really, investigate areas that they were really interested in. So moving to this format allowed it to be a little bit more individualized. I kind of just described the focus on topics. We had one topic every week, and that was the topic that we talked about. So here, in this format, we did a lot more exploration and jumping around topics. And as part of that, it gave us an opportunity to connect those topics a lot more. So when I was going step by step, week by week, we very rarely talked about how virtual worlds might impact course management systems, or vice versa, or how virtual classrooms might benefit from some of the things that are in a Web 2.0 environment. We just explored that technology very kind of in a bubble. Not in all cases, but it was very difficult to bring in that connection in the original format. So we were definitely able to connect topics and talk about topics a number of times as well. So it wasn't just one exploration. And the format changed from doing a reading, let's come to class and discuss it, now let's do an activity, and really let's explore this either on your own or we'll explore it together in class. Part of that might be reading, part of it might be another type of activity. Then let's do something as a group or in your guilds, and then let's discuss it after you have some experience with it. So I was often finding that just reading was not enough to really have a good discussion with the students, even though some of them may have some prior experience or at least a concept of the topic before they would do the reading. So there were a lot more robust discussion as a part of this. So what the multiplayer classroom can look like. So let me do this. Any questions while I'm transitioning over here?
How are you assigning XPs or grades how are you assigning that kind of thing to your students, and how do they choose what activity they do or stuff like that? Post an activity on one area and then pick, or
Well, I'll explain here, and I'll bring up the course course syllabus, and this is the layout here is gonna be a little weird because of the resolution, at least on the Moodle course. But so here is the course syllabus. I'll just check my time here too. Okay, so here's the course syllabus, and I'll go right to that and answer your question. So far, just like a traditional syllabus. Oh, that's right. This one I don't have highlighted. Sorry, I have a version on my computer that is highlighted. So the course description or the course delivery method talks about how the course is a game, and here describes all the things that they're doing in that game. So they're participating individually, also as a guild. They are assigned various roles in that guild that can come into play. Here's a definition of the class time, and then how they earn XP is described here. And they can do, in my design, they had to do one of each of these. They could do more than one if they wanted to, and they could do them in any order that they wanted to. For presentations, there was a little bit more structure there because I had to know when they wanted to do their presentation, but I gave them the choice of which night they wanted to do it, and that was an option for them as well. Does that answer your question? Okay. And I have a little bit more detail about that later on here.
Have you designed a open space where different guilds come in and ask each other questions?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I'll show the Moodle course right after I look at this here. So here was and you know, in my mind, unfortunately, you've got to end with a letter grade at some point. So, that's how it was presented to the students, but it was never talked about as a grade in the course. It was always talked about level and XP. One of the things to consider as you design something like this is to make the initial levels not easy, but fairly closely incremental. So you don't want to have to score 1,000 points to get to level 1. They'll be on level 1 for 3 weeks. So you want to level them up fairly quickly until, you know, right around here, and then start making it a little bit more difficult. I mean, they still need to do work to earn those points, so you're not giving it to them, but you're making the leveling a little bit more easier to achieve, and building some confidence, and also getting them engaged in the game. And then here were the points that were assigned. And the assigned points that are available there are what is possible. So students could do create a question that was related to a topic that we were exploring in class or they had read about. But if it wasn't a very good question, they wouldn't earn the full 15 XP. So they would get credit for completing that quest, but they might only get 5 XP or 8 XP for it, and they would need to do another one if they wanted to earn more XP for that particular item. And that's the case for the rest of those as well.
Are those assignments get submitted to you and you only have to do it?
No, actually, that's a really good question, and I'll show in the Moodle course. What I did differently here as well is most of the assignments were submitted through discussion forums, and so students could see what other people were submitting as well, and could go out and look at it. And then I gave feedback in the discussion forum also, so that everyone could see the feedback. Now, things that were more personal or about the grade points specifically, I gave individual feedback in the grade book. But on the structure of the post, or the quality of the audio in the podcast, or specific technical elements around how they were writing or how they were recording, I gave feedback that everyone could see and learn from. And then they did go out. I mean, that was another thing that was a benefit of this. In the other format, students very rarely saw what other students were doing, or if I gave them the opportunity to, they didn't take it. Here, it was a part of the ongoing structure, so students were regularly going out and looking at other students' work and commenting on it, and that was all part of the experience. And that wasn't something that was required. Like, they didn't get points for that. It was recommended they do it as part of participation, but they weren't seeing an immediate point benefit from that. Yep.
Out of curiosity, did that change the quality, the tenor, the modality of your feedback to the students, that it was happening in a public forum? In other words, you might not call somebody out for plagiarism, or you might in front of the whole class.
No, I wouldn't, but I did do it individually.
Okay.
So it was
certain things are still separated.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, definitely. So it didn't decrease the rigor of what I was looking for, or the things that I might expect from students. The public feedback was more about
What everybody would
the
benefit
structure
from.
of the work and things to think about. And if you go out and look on these blog sites, you'll see that people are blogging in this format because of this, versus, you know, your spelling is horrible here, or, you know, it's spell check, you know, do something here. It's easy. That was personal feedback, and that wasn't.
But that's
how
still
I
an extra
worked.
sort of process an instructor doing this has to think about, that they then have two lanes of feedback that they have to manage.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And I'll just continue to share here. So boss battles were things the students had to do. So those are the only two things that students had to do, and had any type of schedule associated with them. Now, they had to do one of each craft and one of each quest, but they could choose to do those whenever or in any order. Students also got extra points for conquering a land, so they did every quest and every craft in a particular land, which in this case would be virtual classrooms, virtual worlds, Web 2.0, collaboration software. You know, they would get extra points for doing everything in a land, and I did have students that conquered lands. I also incorporated, when we talked about game mechanics, I incorporated things like Tournament of Champions and bonus points during spring break. So during spring break, they could earn twice as much XP on a potential project or craft or quest. Those were things, and while I'm talking about it, I'll share it, but I'll also show some debrief of the experience. Those were things the students really loved, and they actually wanted to see those earlier in the game, and thought that they would have gotten, some of them would have gotten more engaged in the gameplay a lot earlier on if those were part of those experiences. So that's part of designing for your audience and thinking about, okay, I've created this game structure, but there are either some of the group that could benefit from something additional, or they're not reacting to it the way I would like them to react to it. So you kind of change, create a twist, create another element of the gameplay that can move it along the way you're looking for.
Question, if you're assigning points for specific tasks, like a crafting task or a rating task, how do you judge the quality? Suppose somebody just gives something very, thrown together, not well done, versus someone who does something really robust and interesting and uses all of the elements that you're dealing with.
Right,
How
so
do you distinguish?
in some cases it's a rubric, in other cases it's just the description of the assignment in the
So
in the
you
course
give-
management
so
system.
if a task is worth 20 points, you're free to give 5 to 20, depending on the quality of how they complete that task.
Or 1 to 20, yeah,
That's
yeah.
how you
Yep.
okay, so
Yep.
you don't just get 20 points for completing the task.
Nope, definitely not.
Yeah.
And that was part of, one of the things that I found myself doing, and I'll just, I'm gonna skip around here so I can show you the Moodle course as well. So this was some of the gameplay schedule, things that we were doing in class. Normally, week 1 you see some assignments. Normally, there'd be something assigned each week for reading, and specific things due. So what you're seeing here are really boss battle related things, and especially as we get down into the middle of the semester, there's very few actual assignments. The students are really deciding what they need to do to create the crafting and questing, to be prepared for the things that we're going to talk about in class, and there's resources out there for them. So in any one week, the reason there aren't assignments is because one student might be exploring this one topic, another student's exploring this topic, so I I don't know what they're going to be looking at, or be exploring that week, so I don't have an assignment for that. Now, in a class that is more focused on, process or timeline, you would need potentially a little bit more structure there. But even within a process or a timeline, a point in that process or a point in that timeline, there's variability in that. So you can certainly create some variability even in things that are much more linear. So again, this layout is not working out so well here, but here's the Moodle course, and here are all of the lands that they could explore. And within each land, so if I go into, let's go into management systems here. There's videos, let me see, that's going to take too long to collapse all that. There's videos, there's articles, webinars that they can go out and, recorded webinars they can go out and view, technology, links out to technology, so they can essentially explore however they want there and use the resources they want. One of the pieces of feedback, I got 2 pieces of feedback on that. One was that people loved all the resources and they were overwhelmed by all the resources. So one of the things that I'll do for my next iteration is actually kind of present a lobby, if you will, where there are 4 or 5 or 6 things that maybe are like these are maybe where you want to start, and then open the door and you've got all of these resources that you can explore a little bit more. So for folks that are a little bit more overwhelmed. Here are the discussion forums where they were crafting. And so this is how they were submitting, and I was giving feedback in there. Let's see here. And so here are the directions on what they need to do and kind of the expectations. And then you can see some of these have 3, 4, 5 discussions in them versus just the one post. So there's some activity there. And then other ways they were completing quests where they were going out and finding information, creating questions, adding resources. And then here was where guilds could chat amongst themselves or could challenge each other. And there was a wiki even where the guilds could work together.
Do you have an assignment where you can create study material for the high course?
I don't, but that's a possibility. That's a good idea, definitely. I mean, I know in the book he talks about the guilds creating tests for other guilds or creating test questions, and yeah, there's a variety of different things that you can do there with the guilds competing with each other. I had them do case studies. The one thing I found is that the guilds didn't really initiate by themselves. I had to generate that interaction. This was all online. It was synchronous online, so I'm not sure if that was the case that they were never meeting face to face. They didn't really generate that momentum to get started with challenging other guilds. But I'd like to see that and figure out ways to make that happen.
And if you have leaderboards, is that anonymous or is there names, and how does it relate to like purpose?
Yeah, it's by avatar, which I didn't cue the students well enough to make it so you couldn't tell who was who. So that's an area where I definitely need to improve, and probably will not show their total XP there. I will keep track of total XP and kind of share who the leaders are, but not share total XP for everyone. What I'll keep track of on the leaderboard are like a leader for a specific area and a leader in XP for a specific area of the course. So that's not so granular, or so it is more granular and not more total. Yep. Yes?
So when the guilds compete, what they're actually doing, they're writing traditional papers, or they're doing something that looks more like a traditional assignment, right? So what are they competing to get a better grade on the assignment?
You can design it any way you want. The way I designed it was that the guild who did the best got all the points. So it was kind of a 2-man enter, one man leaves type of scenario where they were assigned what to do. They both worked on it. They presented it to the group, and then I decided. And actually, I and another guild, the other guild, graded the assignment, gave feedback on the assignment, and one guild got the points.
So when they withdraw from the course, then you didn't understand that.
Oh no. Okay. Yes.
So did you have any students that were initially resistant to this? This is obviously this is a different learning system than students might be used to. And how did you guide or support, bring them along, kind of coach them along so that they were brought into what you were doing?
Okay, so I will get to that because that's kind of leading into what I'm going to talk about next. The one thing I want to hit on here before we move on to that is the fact that, and I'm over time, that a lot of these benefits didn't really have to do with a game per se. It had to do with the format. So I could have just stripped out all the game elements and I would have had an awesome course design that was so much different than what I'd been doing and would have achieved all my goals. So, and I may even do that at some point. I didn't necessarily need to call them guilds. I could just call them teams or whatever the case may be. So these are some things that were on track, some things I need to rethink. And again, this presentation is out there on the wiki. So here's addressing what you were talking about. So it's kind of split among the group around whether they prefer a traditional format or not. So some of the things that I did to engage them a little bit more was to do that guild activity. So it wasn't happening naturally. So I generated it and included the guilds for people that weren't really doing a whole lot. So kind of the peer element of it was a way that I tried to get them engaged a little bit more. And then the additional XP at spring break and the Tournament of Champions was also another way that I engaged them. So when they could earn more than what they would originally earn, they became a little bit more engaged.
On campus?
I didn't know.
So there, I'll just let you read some of that. There are some things that you're not going to please everyone. It's not going to hit the sweet spot for everyone. But that competitiveness piece is something to manage as part of that. Some people really like to be highly competitive, others don't. So I had a really full spectrum. I mean, there's one student who just, at the very beginning, decided she didn't like games, and she didn't like them at the end or the middle or at any point, and just wasn't engaged. I had another student who said she doesn't like games, she doesn't play games, and she was a killer. She got into it and just really, I think she came in second overall, but she was one of the better students. So there's the grade distribution. So hopefully that was some insight into this format, maybe something that you hadn't thought about before when you're thinking about games in the classroom, designing the course as a game. That's my experience, some of the experiences of others, as well as some resources for you. So take any other questions or feel free to contact me otherwise. Yes.
Just curious, did students know ahead of time what they were getting into? Was it on the course description that this was in this format? And going forward, do you think it should be?
It was not. And it was not because we offer a number of different sections of the course, and not all of them are taught in this format. That's a really good question. From my perspective, in the program I teach in, I don't think it should be, because I want them to have this experience from the standpoint of a course design, because that's what they're doing. They're designing courses in different formats. They're designing them with technology integration. So I want them to have this experience whether they really want to or not. In undergrad or another type of program, that's a really good consideration. Thinking about warning people ahead of time, if you will. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much.